So we're back with more Titans cards to review. This time we've got a bunch of Hunter cards and I think potentially two new archetypes slash packages to talk through here. Kicking it off with a sick looking weapon, the Star-Strung Bow. It is a 6 mana, 6/2 weapon, and it costs 1 less for each friendly secret that has triggered this game. So this is going to kick off package number 1, a secret synergy package. And that's it. This is really probably the only actual synergy payoff card for the secrets we're going to see in this video. There's some secrets and ways to play secrets, but this is the big payoff for it, which this is nuts if it's discounted, clearly, right? Like a 2 mana 6/2 weapon is completely bonkers. That is an outrageous amount of damage incredibly efficiently, and it might be excuse enough to run a bunch of secrets, but it definitely leaves me wanting a little more because, you know, if you're not in a spot where that damage is meaningful and that's the only big payoff that you have, I don't know that we're gonna see this package go very far, because secrets in their own right are often very clunky, very weird. They don't usually feel good to play as is. There has to be some monster payoff typically to make secret decks actually get there, or ways to really reliably cheat them into play, which in standard right now there's a couple like neutral secret synergy cards that support it, like Anonymous Informant, and we've also got like Sketchy Strangers, not really an enabler, but another way to get some secrets into play pretty affordably without sacrificing too much tempo. But there's just not a lot. Oh, I guess Hunter has one way to draw a secret reliably, but again, not actually like cheating it into play or anything necessarily. So like, I do think this is a great payoff in a vacuum. Like, this looks nuts, you know, 0 mana 6/2 weapon. Even at 4 mana, you're probably pretty excited to play this, honestly. So I think after 2 or 3 secrets, this becomes a really, really good card. It's just, is that deck going to exist? Is that deck actually going to be viable? Because the rest of the secret package isn't there yet. This feels like to me something that's going to be lying in wait. And then maybe, you know, in the mini set or like an expansion down the road, we're going to get some more secret synergy payoffs for Hunter. And then this card comes in and you're like, okay, now this makes sense. Now we have enough cool stuff to do thanks to our secrets that's worth it. I don't know that this is good enough to drive that on its own merits, but definitely a card still to keep in the back of your mind. And definitely pay note for any future secret payoff cards in Hunter, because that in combination with this could be absolutely monstrous and could be kind of crazy. I'm just doubtful for now. So our next secret themed card here is the Titan Forged Traps, a 2 mana spell. Allows you to discover and cast a secret, or if you forge this ahead of time, you can do that twice. So 2 mana, the base effect, 4 mana effectively total if you want to forge it. And I will say, you know, Discover is nice for secrets because you can get one that really fits the current game state. Like, you know, if I need damage, I can look for Motion Denied. If I need to protect a minion on board, you know, I can go for this new secret we're about to talk about, Bait and Switch. You know, if I need, Explosive Trap to deal with a wide board, perfect. You know, I'm going to discover an Explosive Trap. It's going to be an amazing moment. That's awesome. So Discover does definitely up the value of this, because sometimes secrets, you draw one and it's like, oh, this is terrible right now. So this is, I think, better than just having a secret in hand. The Forge aspect, I'm not convinced that's as exciting. I don't really think you're super pumped to do that. I mean, maybe if you can see yourself not needing a secret right now, but you think the opponent's going to do something spicy on a future turn, or you can have more information, and you think discovering twice is going to help you guarantee to hit the secret that you want. Those could all be reasons to forge this, just setting up for later, but you are kind of walking yourself down a narrow path there where you want to play that sooner rather than later to start extracting that value that you invested. Ultimately, again, I actually think this is a pretty good secret card, a secret, a foundation card for a secret deck, probably much better than just running a secret in your deck. But again, don't know that deck gets there yet. Keep this one in the back of your mind as a possibility for later. This does seem like it fits well, just not there now. And then the final secret synergy piece here is Bait and Switch, a 2 mana spell. When a friendly minion is attacked, give it +3/+3. So that's a big stat buff for 2 mana, and that could be really helpful to help you protect an early game board investment play. A 1-drop like your Costumed Singer, if it somehow doesn't die, You can bait and switch, and then next time they try to attack into your Costume Singer, boom, he's now a 5/4, which is really nice and aggressive. You might actually be better off just playing an awesome, scaling 1-drop, get your 1/3 Naga down and just start whacking the opponent really hard with a card like this. So this is one that might be able to exist in some cases outside of a secret package, but at the same time, I don't think you'd do that. It's just too conditional. I think you'd rather just run like Doggy Biscuit and know that you have buffs that you can push really reliably and that aren't dependent on the opponent's decision making. So I don't know if this can exist, independently outside of a secret deck. It probably needs that secret reason to be run. But, even something like the anonymous informant we talked about, play informant, play this behind it. If the opponent tries to trade it and that informant gets really big, helps shore up that kind of board. So it's definitely a possibility. It looks like an okay sort of secret to me. So moving on here to Hearthstone's chonkiest new boy. This one took the title for me. Observer of Myths is a 2-mana 1/4 with, I think, really cool design. After you summon a minion with more attack than this, give all friendly minions +1 attack. So potentially a really big board buffer here, but it's one that has diminishing returns kind of built into it in two different ways. Number one, note that it's buffing itself. So each time you play a minion and you buff this one's attack, the next activation gets a little bit more difficult. So suddenly you have to play it, first off, you have to play a 2-attack thing, then a 3-attack thing, then a 4-attack thing, then 5-attack thing, etc., to keep buffing this up. But on top of that, obviously, each time you play a card, you're also reducing your board space. So if you want to have enough things to meaningfully buff, you also have a limitation there. So, the Observer of Myths is taking up a spot. And then if you want like 3 things to buff, for instance, to make this a really meaningful high impact buff, then you only have 3 spots remaining. And there's a couple different checks in place there where, if you want a really crazy big Bloodlust style effect across 4 or 5 things, it's likely not going to be possible with Observer of Myths outside some like perfect rush trade-in plays and such. So a card with some like crazy big upside, but also some natural limitations built in. Now that said, I still think there are plenty of sweet spots for this card where you have a couple things on board and you're able to play a couple things and you push 4 extra damage, 6 extra damage, whatever it is, and you're in the process still developing a board. It's not like you're making a sacrifice. Whereas in many cases with like Bloodlust as a finisher, you're spending that 5 mana, the only thing you're getting out of it is damage, so you have to use it as a finisher. Observer of Myths can be a finisher in some cases, I think, but it's also just great development because you're building a bigger, higher threatening board in the process of trying to push some damage anyway, because it's happening through minion plays, not through just mana, going into the effect itself. So, that kind of brings up the floor on this card from a like safety of play standpoint. You're not doing anything crazy or sacrificial here. You're doing things you want to do anyway, and then on top of that, you're getting this really big bonus as well. And as we're gonna see, Hunter's getting even more minions here and aggressive wide board kind of plays that do support the Observer of Myths really nicely here. And I think we're going to see some really scary, like turn 3, turn 4 Hunter boards that feel like 20 damage is staring you down in the face. And if you don't have the perfect kind of removal for it, you're probably just going to fall over dead. And that's going to be in large part thanks to this card. That 4 health in particular means you might even be able to tempo this out safely on turn 2 sometimes for setup. You don't have to. This card can be a great follow-up, but it's also something you can just play on 2 and then use him as the threat. Like buff him up to a 3/4 or something on the next turn. Hey, that's not bad at all. I'm just going to push some stats on the Myths himself. So all in all, it looks like a lot of different angles for this card. A lot of potential. This one looks really strong. So here's one of those cards that's going to support the Observer of Myths, the Awakening Tremors here, a 1 mana spell. It gets you 3/4/1 worms, and those are going to cost a 1 mana each. So fill your hand up with stuff. That's great, by the way, at buffing with the Observer of Myths. So turn 1, Awakening Tremors, maybe turn 2 Observer of Myths, you don't have to. And then maybe turn 3, you play 3 of these worms. That means the Observer of Myths gets buffed 3 times. So all 3 will go through. This becomes a 4/4, and you also have like a 5/1, a 6/1, and a 7/1 on board as well, which That's the kind of board we're talking about that'll be super threatening. Now, obviously, most of those things will die pretty easily to a board sweep of some kind, you know, just small rushers, small AoE, a whirlwind effect will wipe out most of the trimmers. But the interesting thing is, like, if you're going to have a board clear that's good at dealing with trimmers, you might not be answering the Observer of Myths because it has a much different shape. It's a chunky boy with his 4 health, right? So, you know, you might be leaving behind the prominent threat there. So, you know, that's a perfect curve scenario. That's not always going to happen, but we probably see that pattern represented a lot with these sorts of cards. If not, you know, exactly on 1, 2, 3, some other point in the game, it still becomes perhaps a bit of an issue. And if it ever does stick, I mean, that's just game over, right? You're talking about too much damage to ever survive in a Beast Hunter package. Now, we've also got some other Beast synergy stuff that might help here. Remember, like the Thorn Mantle Musician from last set, the 1-drop that will buff your Beasts cards. This one here, Finale, the next Beast you summon gets +1/+1. So this could be a way to make these a 5/2. That 2 health point is, of course, way better than 1 to get around pings and those sorts of effects. So far more than doubling, really, in essence. So that might be another line that helps support the Awakening Trimmers here. Any other Beast buffs that come along, of course, are really going to help this package quite nicely. So, yeah, this looks good. I don't think this is quite as good as, like, Piranhas and Shaman. The fact that those start small sucks, but they have Rush, and they do still scale up to be pretty threatening. So those having Rush is a big deal over this. Being able to trade them in means they're not as susceptible to that return removal because they're getting their value immediately out of Rush sometimes. They do still matter sometimes, just playing them proactively and just having a wide board down. That's true. The Terminators will also matter in that case sometimes, very much the same. But Piranhas do feel better to me because of Rush. That just adds an extra layer to them that this doesn't quite have. But nonetheless, I think this still looks like a really solid card. So next up here is Always a Bigger Jormungandr, a 1-mana spell. Give a minion +2 attack and excess damage dealt by attacks hits the enemy hero. You'll remember that effect from Trampling Rhino card that was really good in Hunter in its era. And I think this card has the potential to be really good as well. Hunter likes to push damage, and when you can do that while still keeping your opponent's board in check, that's really nice. So you can see this played on like the 4/1 Worms we looked at earlier. Just have a 6/1 that trades in, kills something, still pushes a little bit of extra damage. You play this on Rush minions to turn your Rush into face damage, which can be really nice. That was kind of Trampling Rhino's whole deal. And then you've even got stuff like you play this on your big Lifesteal Hound and cleave with it, and your Hound is dealing extra damage, and the extra damage dealt by the Hound on small things with that cleave is still gonna actually go face. So you get you know, the ability to both heal a bunch with Hound and then also just hit face really hard with Hound. So to me, I don't know, man, this card looks like it has a lot of flexibility across various archetypes. I don't know if Hound decks can actually run a 1-mana spell like this. That may be a little bit too tied to the fate of exactly Hound, but any aggressive deck probably finds room for this because it can just push damage when it needs to, can help you take good trades without sacrificing damage when you need to. So it seems like a really efficient tool in the toolkit of some aggressive decks. I think this looks pretty good. And then next up here is the Absorbent Parasite, a little 2-mana 3/1. It's got Magnetic and Rush, and it can magnetize to mechs and beasts, which is really cool. It's both magnetic and parasitic, and that's a really fun design. I like this a lot. The Rush also, of course, is impactful. You can actually even kind of see that in combination with Jormungandr. Play a 4/1, make it a 7/1, make it a 9/1 with Rush that trades into a 1/1, and you've got yourself a King Crush, basically. Which, you know, sounds like a lot of commitment with like 3 cards or whatever, but maybe it's not so crazy. Maybe it's not so crazy. Outside of the Rush getting value, you know, 3/1 buff is actually not very good for 2 mana. We've got things already like Doggy Biscuit that are just great buffs for Hunter that are probably better follow-ups in a lot of cases. While this is a little bit more damage, it's a lot less health, which is still meaningful that early in the game. If you're playing this on curve in particular, I think you really want to make sure you're shoring up the safety of your board as much as you can. So, you know, it's got possibilities in mech decks and beast decks, but I don't think it's like crazy good. I think it's just fine. It might be one of those cards again that's near the bottom of the list that kind of slots in or whatever, but I don't think we see this regularly or often. I don't think as a buff it looks that good, even with the Rush aspect. As that like combo with Jormungandr, that's just too many cards together for aggressive decks to piece together that reliably. So a fun idea. I'm sure there'll be some cool stuff you can do with both of these. that feels like it breaks the game occasionally. But I think this one offers some consistency and reliability. This one probably doesn't as often. I don't think this looks quite as high upside to me. So finally here we have the Fable Stable Hand, a 3-mana 3/3 rush. With Battle Cry, if you control a minion with 4 or more attack, gain +2/+2. So obviously that's a really direct synergy here for your 4/1 worms. You generate some 4/1 worms. You hope one sticks around on board, and you can play the Fable Stable Hand. Or since they only cost 1, you can certainly weave these together at the same turn as well. Play a worm, use that to buff up your Fable Stable Hand, and it's going to be a 5/5 with Rush, which, I mean, that's meaningful. Even on turn 4, if you did have to weave this together with a worm, that's definitely taking some good trades. Leaving behind a body that's, you know, aggressive and threatening, which you like. Also something that could reliably activate your Observer of Myths, of course. I guess it would count as a 5/5 in that case, I think. I think the Battle Cry would resolve, because this is after you summon a minion. Yeah, not whenever. So, yeah, it should activate your Observer. Even as a 3/3, it might sometimes, right? So, you know, I do think this makes sense in this kind of deck. But I will say, I think a card like this might actually fall towards the bottom of the list. And I mean that in the regards that it might get cut sooner than other things as more cards come along. I could see this being one of the quicker cuts. It's just got this conditionality built in that can sometimes be really hard for more aggressive decks that are trying to find really tight on-curve lines in the early game. And having a 3-drop that maybe you don't always feel good to play on turn 3, that feels risky to me, because you don't want to play this as a 3-mana 3/3 rush. That's just not a good card these days. And sometimes you won't have a minion that lived on 2 that's proccing your Fable Stable Hand in particular. Because really only the worms might be good. You know, most of the things happening before this aren't notably going to have 4 attack very, very often on average. So, you know, this is a card that's coming down more in the mid game. It's got this condition. If you don't have an Awakening Trimmers to set it up or some other reliable plays, it's going to feel like it's whiffing fairly often. So I do think this is a card that probably gets run early on just for lack of better options, but I don't think this keeps up all that well as more and more things come in to fill out a package and fill out an archetype. I could see this one being left behind fairly quickly, which means it's probably just okay at best. Starstrung Bow is a 4-star card in waiting. Titan Forge Trapped is a 3-star card. Bait and Switch is a 3-star card. Observer of Myths is a 4-star card. Awakening Trimmers is a 4-star card. Always a Bigger Yormonger is a 4-star card. Absorbent Parasite is a 2-star card. Fable Stable Hand is a 3-star card. And there you go, folks. That wraps it up for these Hunter cards. I'm left like a little amiss on these. Like, you know, I can see some like standout power cards here, like the Starstruck Bow that makes sense when all things line up. But I don't know, man. They still just kind of feel like a little bit haphazard and just kind of, you know, how does all of this piece together? I still feel like Wild Seeds stuff just looks like it'll be better, or Big Hunter stuff looks like it'll be better. So I don't really see these coming in to like shake up Hunter much. I like them thematically in some ways, but also, man, I might just end up being clunky. I'm curious what you guys think. Does this feel like a cohesive design for you? Does this feel like it supports the Titan and the Titan Keeper we saw earlier? That's another great question. Hodir, I think, is just too slow for all the 8/8s. Like, yeah, technically some high attack values are good, but that just seems really, really slow. So I don't know, man. The Titan was kind of you know, on his own, doing his own thing. He can kind of fit in anywhere, I guess. But I don't really. I'm trying to load these up literally the whole time I'm talking about it. I don't really see these supporting the Titans much either. You know, Tayshalak, here's kind of some weapon independence, and then Hodir. I mean, just Hodir doing Hodir stuff. So I don't know. As a whole, this Hunter package, just I'm left like trying to figure it out. What am I doing? I don't know. Doesn't look that cohesive, I guess, to me, despite there being like some pretty, you know, things designed pretty specifically around each other. But anyway, curious to hear your thoughts on that. Thanks much as always for watching, and until next time, game on.